determining whether there are discrete connections or distinctive behavioral factors between two or more previously unrelated cases by means of crime scene analysis, including the examination of offender MO and signature. Love map, a developmental representation or a template in the mind and in the brain depicting the idealized lover and idealized program of sexo-erotic activity projected in imagery or actually engaged with that lover. MO behavior, actions and decisions intended to assist in completion of a crime. Modus operandi MO, a Latin term by which means method of operating. It refers to the manner in which a crime has been committed. Motive, emotional, psychological, material needs that impel and are satisfied by behavior. Offender signature. Offender signature refers to the pattern or cluster of MO behaviors, signature behaviors and motivation oriented behaviors that occur within an offense or across a series of related offenses. Psychodynamics, the manner in which conscious and subconscious drives emotions and desires combine to determine personality and motivation. Signature behaviors. Signature behaviors are those acts committed by an offender that are not necessary to commit the crime but rather suggest psychological or emotional needs of the offender. Offender signature refers to the pattern or a cluster of modus operandi behaviors, signature behaviors and motive oriented behaviors that occur within an offense or across a series of related offenses. MO behaviors are actions and decisions that are intended to assist in the completion of a crime. By contrast, signature behaviors are those acts committed by an offender that are not necessary to commit the crime but rather suggest psychological or deep emotional needs of the offender. An offender's signature behaviors are not functional in nature. They reflect psychodynamic relationships and predispositions that are generally more stable and enduring over time than those evident in their MO. The pattern of behaviors may be unique to a particular offender and may be used to distinguish between crime scenes and potentially between offenders. However, this is infrequently the case. Origins heading. Adapted from the investigative concept of a criminal trademark, the term signature came to be used in legal parlance to refer to an unusual or a distinctive criminal MO. Expert testimony regarding this kind of evidence is often proffered or sometimes admitted in court to link cases for the purpose of showing offender identity, criminal propensity to demonstrate motive. It may also be used to help demonstrate the need for joining or separating cases at trial. As provided in early court decisions and legal references as far back as McCormick on evidence from 1954, MO evidence is only admissible when the behavioral pattern is unusual and distinctive, like a signature. Repetition of similar behaviors is not enough. However, MO behaviors frequently change, are susceptible to a variety of influences, and are not always that distinctive. In other words, MO behaviors generally do not by themselves provide the distinctiveness of a signature. So while early criminologists and jurists inappropriately conflated the concepts of MO and signature, the modern literature recognizes that they are very different. To understand these differences, a basic understanding and consideration of offender psychodynamics is required. Offender psychodynamics. Psychodynamics is a term that refers to how conscious and subconscious drives, emotions and desires combine to determine personality and motivation. To understand offender psychodynamics, we must start with accepting that not all offenders are the same. They each have different histories, different tastes and different needs. Therefore, similar behaviors committed under similar circumstances by different offenders will not necessarily be for identical or even similar motivations. According to the American psychologist Dr. John Money, the explanation for this behavioral motivational distinctiveness is found in the mind's eye of the offender. Each maintains a pattern of specific behaviors and subsequent associated feelings that is referred to as the love map. This is a term which Dr. Money developed to describe an idealized scene, person or program of activities that satisfy the particular emotional and psychological needs of an offender. Love maps, specialized needs or fantasies develop in all people, not just criminals, as a part of the natural process of human development and can subsequently be affected by both biological and environmental factors. The development of an offender's signature behavior necessarily follows a parallel path with sexual and emotional development As a love map develops and related personality is shaped, the behaviors necessary to achieve individual needs are identified, incorporated, and developed. For some, the result may be a healthy expression manifested in nurturing and intimacy seeking relationships. For others, at the more distant end of the continuum, the result may be the incorporation and development of antisocial and even criminal behaviors. Dr. Mani theorized that criminal behaviors result when that human developmental process is derailed and a person is able to make pleasurable association with violent or otherwise criminal activity. These associations, varied and evolving over time, amount to a behavioral distinctiveness in the way that an individual offender seeks to satisfy emotional or psychological needs during the commission of a crime, such as rape, homicide, arson, and other similar or serial offences. As an offender's fantasies develop over time, so does the need to live out those fantasies. When a violent or a predatory fantasy is subsequently acted out, the act itself fuels the fantasy in the mind of the offender and causes it to evolve. The process is complementary and can facilitate the evolution of fantasy, signature behaviors, and overall offender signature over time. Behavioral consistency theory. The behavioral consistency theory consists that the same criminal will behave in a relatively the same way across offences. Some researchers have hypothesized that there is both offender behavioral consistency and offender behavioral distinctiveness, which may be used to linkage analysis efforts to identify crimes suspected of being committed by the same perpetrator on the basis of behavioral similarity. The assumption of these researchers ignore two of the more important axioms of behavioral evidence analysis. 1. Different offenders do similar things for different reasons. That is known as principle of behavioral variance. Second, individual offender behaviors are multi-determined. They can be the result of multiple offender motivations and multiple external influences. This is known as the principle of multi-determination. This is not to suggest that the case linkage efforts using offender signature are futile because of the complex and dynamic nature of human behavior. Rather, that case linkage is not always possible and it is rarely certain. Oversimplifying the problem of interpretation with assumptions that ignore the principles of behavioral evidence analysis does not move us closer to accurate case linkage efforts, it moves us further away. This position directly contradicts the offender behavioral consistency hypothesis originally proposed by Cantor as an underlying assumption of profiling methods employed by investigator psychologists in their research. Cantor's hypothesis predicts that offenders will show consistency or similarity in their criminal behavior across their series of crimes. Unfortunately, not only can behavioral manifestations of MO and signatures vary across a series, but also the series under examination may be only one type of crime among many that are being committed by an offender. An offender responsible for a series of rapes may also be responsible for a series of burglaries. An offender responsible for a series of homicides may also be responsible for a parallel series of rape, robbery, and theft. Offenders with such multiple criminal pathways are by no means rare, yet scholars tend to lump and study offenders into fixed groups as though criminal diversification does not happen at all. Heading: Recognizing signature behavior. It should be noted that the mere repetition of a given behavior across multiple offences is not enough to make it a signature oriented. It may simply be a repeated part of the offender's MO. Generally, the following will be a true of a signature behavior. 1. It takes extra time to complete beyond mere functional MO behavior. 2. Unnecessary for the completion of the crime as such. 3. Involves an expression of a need or an emotion. 4. May involve an expression of fantasy. If a behavior satisfies these criteria, then it is a signature behavior. That is to say, it is related to the offender's psychological and emotional needs, fantasy and motive, rather than functional crime-related needs. Next heading: Active and passive signature behavior. There are two types of signature behaviors: active and passive. Active signature behavior are conscious or deliberate acts committed by the offender. They result from an offender who is in control and intends to leave a specific psychological impression or to satisfy a particular emotional need. Examples can include, but are not limited to, specific and repeated victim type, specific and repeated constellation of injuries to the body, notes left at the scene, specific and repeated weapons that go beyond mere functions, specific and repeated ligature, binding type or configuration. Active signature behavior represents a clear message from the offender. The offender is aware it is being sent and it is meant to be recognized and understood. Passive signature behaviors are incidental in nature. They result from an offender who is not in control and unintentionally leaves a particular psychological impression. Examples can include, but are not limited to: 1. Overkill or brutal level of force being used. 2. Obsessive compulsive behavior, that is stalking and harassment. 3. Jealous or self-deprecating language or scripting. Passive signature behavior is the result of offenders that are out of control of their emotions and are unaware that their feelings or needs may be revealed by what they are doing. Limiting factors. There are important limitations to the concept of offender signature that require attention. An offender's signature pattern is sometimes referred to inappropriately as the calling card or a trademark. These terms evoke the visions of a static, inflexible, indelible mark or a psychological imprint left behind at the crime scene, something that is inconsistently present and easily discerned. While this is a regular feature of crime-related films, TV and novels, such evidence is rare in real life. Many serial or predatory offenders do not have a need to engage in personal expression of emotion that are distinct to their individuality formed personality. Furthermore, despite the distinctiveness of an offender signature, which is a result of many psychodynamic variables, it is not truly appropriate to state that two crime scenes related by signature alone are psychologically identical. For example, the term match may be used to suggest shared characteristics between two things, but by their very nature, crime scenes and crime scene behaviors cannot precisely be the same across offences, even when the same offender is responsible for them. Not only are the locations likely to be different, but also the victims are most certainly different people with their own responses to offender behaviors that will in turn influence the offender's behavioral expression, both MO and signature orientation. One of the other primary reasons for the lack of absolute certainty in interpreting signature behavior as unique to a specific offender is the subjectivity of the interpretation itself. While offenders may be psychologically distinct, forensic examiners cannot see through the eyes of an offender with perfect objective clarity. They can show the most likely perspectives and the needs of the offender by demonstrating a strong convergence of the physical and behavioral evidence, but they cannot go so far as to call it a psychological fingerprint. Additionally, when asked to make inferences about offender signature, forensic examiners may not have all the facts in the case, or they may be operating with flawed investigative assumptions. Consequently, a thorough forensic examination of the offender signature will consider the following factors. 1. Whether the amount of behavioral evidence is sufficient to make an interpretation of offender signature. Example, was there a competent crime scene reconstructive performed? Were the forensic protocols that the reconstruction is based on adequate? Was evidence of wound patterns lost due to bodily decay? Third, whether the amount of behavioral evidence is fully representative of the offender's needs. Example, is there evidence of interruption during the crime? Did the offender have the time to do all of these things that he or she felt was important? Third, whether the behavioral evidence suggests a signature that is part of an escalation or evolution in an offender's fantasy continuum, or whether the offender's signature appears to be relatively fixed over time. As a consequence of these limitations, it may not always be possible to link or unlink cases using offender signature for the following reasons. 1. An offender may not always leave behind evidence of signature behavior. Example, interrupted offense, incomplete offense, or limiting X factors. Second, an offender may engage in precautionary acts that conceal the evidence of signature behaviors, burning evidence, removing unknown fantasy items from the crime scene, staging the crime scene. Third, evidence of offender behavior may be lost, overlooked, or destroyed by forensic personnel and criminal investigators. Next heading, case linkage, offender signature and court. Case linkage is the process of determining whether there are discrete connections or distinctive behavioral factors between two or more previously unrelated cases by means of crime scene analysis, including the examination of offender MO and signature. This kind of analysis is done in both investigative and forensic context. When the physical evidence in a given case is insufficient, or when the law allows it, behavioral evidence, that is offender signature, may be employed as a means of addressing the question of case linkage. Legal rulings. In California, for example, some legislation and legal rulings have led to the more frequent courtroom use of behavioral evidence relating to offender MO and signature, specifically in cases involving alleged multiple offences committed on separate occasions, that is, serial offences, most often involving kidnapping, arson, rape, and homicide. The issue of linking cases by examining offensive behavior becomes central. Below are 3 issues common to forensic casework necessitating case linkage efforts involving offender signature. 1. Common scheme or plan. Under California Penal Code, Evidence Code, evidence of both charged and uncharged misconduct, cases where an offender is suspended but no charges have been filed, may be admitted for the purpose of demonstrating a common plan, scheme, or design if the offences are sufficiently similar. In Evolt case, does the thus state that evidence of prior uncharged sexual act is admissible at a subsequent trial for sexual offences in order to show a common design or a plan on the part of the defendant. However, the court also found that the evidence of uncharged misconduct may only be admissible if it is sufficiently similar to the charged offence to support the inference that there are manifestations of a common design or a plan. No concrete definition of sufficiently similar has been established by the courts, connected together in their commission. Under California Penal Code, multiple offences committed by the same offender in multiple countries may be consolidated for trial in a single country, thus introducing a highly prejudicial element. If it can be shown that the crimes are properly joinable and that they are connected together in their commission. No concrete definition of properly joinable or connected together in their commission has been established by the courts. Next, propensity. The California Penal Code was more recently added to provide a specific exception in sex crime cases where a person is charged with a sexual offence and the prosecution wants to offer evidence of prior or other sexual offences to show a propensity to commit a charged offence. This is a special exception to a single out sexual predators. Many states have similar, if not identical, legal statutes related to decisions regarding admissibility. According to Evolt and Balcom, the greatest degree of similarity is required for evidence of uncharged misconduct to be relevant to prove identity. Furthermore, for identity to be established, the uncharged misconduct and charged offence must share common features that are sufficiently distinctive so as to support the inference that the same person committed both acts. The person and the characteristics of the crimes must be so unusual and distinctive as to be like a signature. Despite these stringent legal requirements, there is no evidence or research to suggest that behavioral evidence alone may be used like fingerprints or DNA with respect to determining with any certainty that the same person must be responsible for two or more crimes. Furthermore, while there may be general or thematic similarities between some cases, the dissimilarities between cases of greater weight and importance in rendering final linkage conclusions. Waste. Linkage analysis efforts that fail to account for dissimilarities, focusing only on similarities, should be considered inadequate at best, if not biased. Expressing case linkage results. To enable the expression of behaviorally oriented case linkage findings in a manner that is useful to investigators and the court, but does not mislead with respect to certainty, a series of progressive confidence statements may be used. 1. Behavioral dissimilarity, an investigative linkage, behavioral commonality, and a probative link. Behavioral dissimilarity means the behavioral factors have been compared and they are dissimilar. For example, two homicide cases are presented. One involves the use of a handgun with a single shot to the victim's head. The other involves manual strangulation. The two cases have evidence of behavioral dissimilarity in the use of a weapon. It is important to note that the behavioral dissimilarities must be analyzed in the context of the entire crime and in relation to all the offender behavior. The existence of dissimilar behavior factors between crime does not necessarily refute linkage. Take, for example, an offender who engages in unique signature behavior with multiple victims of different risk or exposure levels. Victims' risk and exposure in this case is a behavioral dissimilarity, but the different levels may reflect changes in the offender's MO behavior over time and across offences. Therefore, behavioral dissimilarities may exist within crimes that evidence a probative link. Next, an investigative linkage. In a general class connection between one or more cases that serve to inform the allocation of investigative resources. These in terms of behavior, general opportunistic circumstances of the offence, general similarities in MO and similar signature aspects evidenced by signature behaviors that are perhaps dissimilar. Such a link, as the name suggests, requires further investigation. It is not conclusive. An example of an investigative link would be finding two women murdered in their homes in generally the same fashion in the same community over the course of a year. The general description is of interest and resources should be applied to investigate further possible connection, as may be found in victimology, MO, signature behavior, and physical evidence. During any one of these examinations, a more certain linkage may be established or refuted. If more information is not available, it must be remembered that an investigative linkage is not sufficient to suggest a behavioral commonality, let alone a probative link. A behavioral commonality is present when the behavioral factors have been compared and they are similar but not unique. For example, two convenience robberies occur in broad daylight. Both involve .357 Magnum handgun. Both involve an offender wearing a mask. These robberies evidence behavioral commonalities with respect to the time of day, precautionary acts, location type, use of weapon, and even motive. However, this robbery pattern is not unique, especially in large urban areas. A probative link is evidenced by either a unique offender behavior or a unique offender signature that is shared across two or more cases. With limited behavioral dissimilarity, it is a connection that is sufficiently distinctive to support the inference that the same person is responsible. Physical evidence such as certain kinds of DNA may also provide a probative link and must therefore not be ignored unless intentionally set aside for court purposes. When determining whether a unique offender signature exists between two or more crimes, the behavioral dissimilarities are also of importance. If significant behavioral dissimilarity exists between crimes that cannot be explained by evolving or devolving MO behavior, a probative link should not be cited in the final case linkage analysis.